Hello, I'm Mark Ellen. Thanks for clicking this word in your ear, the latest of hundreds of conversations David Hepworth and I have had on this podcast we started 17 years ago. Some with ourselves, others with musicians, authors, comedians, and other people we like. If you enjoy them and want to support us and keep it all coming and get extra entertainment, including the weekly quiz and a special event on your birthday, visit patreon.com/word in your ear or just like or subscribe in whatever way you prefer. Welcome to this edition of Word in Your Ear, which has reminded me of the delight in the Smash Hits office that Dave and I used to occupy back in the day when we first heard that Tenpole Tudor had a new single called Throwing My Baby Out with the Bathwater, which is magnificent and it still makes me laugh. We're joined by the band's noble leader and the author of a new memoir called The Pen Is Mightier, Ed Tudor Pole. Ed, it's lovely to see you.
Hello, everybody.
Very good. So look, traditionally what we do is start by asking people if they can remember the record playing equipment, the music playing equipment in their home when they were young. Can you remember what it was in your case?
Well, yes, it was my mother's basic record player, with a lid and a cream sort of plastic cover to the arm. And you could stack up the singles to play them in a row,
What sort of things were playing on it?
Well, those records I was buying in that time, sort of 1964, Kinks and The Who and the Beatles, Stones.
Yeah, you talked about the Beatles. I think you said that they'd jolted me out of a semi-trance-like state of disengagement, but the Rolling Stones electrified me. So why was that? What was it about the Stones particularly that was so phenomenal?
Oh, no, well, they were just so, when they came along, well, you must recall they were so shocking. Just as shocking as the Sex Pistols were, only 13 years later. And so that lent them a terrific glamour. But essentially, it was the sheer music. It's all over now. It's an astonishing record. How can anyone resist it, And I just found my home. It was a Damascene conversion to the Stones. I mean, there's just something personal about the Stones. It's like real love. Obviously, I love the Beatles, but it's much more personal somehow, the Rolling Stones.
The big departure about the Rolling Stones, which people forget now, is that they all wore different clothes. Whereas prior to the Rolling Stones, everybody, all bands, all wore a uniform.
How interesting.
Whereas Mick would have a stripy sweater and, Keith would have, a suit or, and so
Brian Jones who had the stripy sweater.
Well, absolutely. And so when you watch someone on telly, you spend all your time just drinking in the details of what they were wearing.
I know. It was good. Although I think perhaps we should go back to uniforms. It might be quite fun now in a semi-ironic way.
Right. Well, for years, that's what musicians did. They all had uniforms, did they? Of all kinds. They was part of being a musician. You had a uniform.
Well, indeed, I suppose the Beatles
pretty much played in uniform the entire time, didn't they?
Loosening of those strict dress codes.
Well, that was the thing. That's the thing that all people always said about the Rolling Stones when they first appeared. They looked as if they'd wandered in off the street.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody else looked as if they'd gone through some costume procedure prior to, whether it was Acker Bilk's jazz band or the Shadows or the Beatles.
You're right.
Anyway, sorry, it's just my theory.
No, but the Stones, there's lots about the Stones in the book, and you obviously were obsessed with them, and to the extent that you saw Keith appear at the Marlborough Street Magistrates Court, and you went to see the Stones in Hyde Park, I think, when you were 14. Have you got any memories of those two events?
Well, the memory of Hyde Park, I went there the night before, but I was on my own. I could have got much nearer to the stage, but I think I was 14 and a bit shy, and those Hells Angels are having a jolly up near the stage and raucous drinking. So I kept a sort of respectful distance. But it was quite difficult because the following day was very hot indeed, and I had hardly any water or drinks. So by the time the Stones had come on, I'd been in the burning sun for about 10 hours.
There's no health and safety in those days.
No, you're fried to a crisp.
Tell us something about your background, because this is something that, quite a lot of the early chapters are engaged with. You came from, it's inadequate to call it a middle-class background, isn't it? How would you characterize it?
Well, on paper, I suppose you'd call it, county is what my grandmother would have said, and quite posh in a way. Well, yes, I suppose quite posh, or sort of upper middle class, they'd say, because my great-grandfather was Squire of Tunbridge, and there were liveried servants at the table and everything, but then came the Wall Street crash and he lost everything. So there's a sort of poshness in the ambience, but except in my own case, I was brought up by my mother, and it was just a place of total violence. So there was no, I think, doesn't that trump social things? It was just a violent household. So whether one said toilet or lavatory was sort of irrelevant.
So you're talking about your father here, right? It was quite a complicated.
No, I'm talking about my mother. It was it was a particularly, I wasn't in a very good space, geographically, specifically, but the background was fairly posh, I guess you'd say. My grandmother was awfully grand, in a very nice way.
But this was brilliantly played on, because later on, I think you billed yourself as having been related to Henry VIII, or somebody billed you. Maybe it wasn't you, actually.
Malcolm McLaren.
It's really Nigel Dickens' Stiff Records.
It would have been Stiff Records, probably.
Well, no, certainly wasn't him. Well, yes, I claim descent from Richard III's niece.
All right, okay.
Because when Henry VII took over, having beaten Richard at Bosworth Field and the Tudor regime started, his niece, Richard III's niece, was still a threat because she could claim perhaps had a superior claim. So Henry VII got round that by marrying her off to his best mate, Richard Pole. So Margaret, the daughter of Duke of Clarence, became Margaret Pole, and she's, but you're descended from Edward III, Mark and David.
All right, am I?
Is everybody?
You are both descended from Edward III, I guarantee it.
How would you know that?
Because we all are.
Okay.
How come?
Because you know what it's like, how it magnifies. Look how many relations you've got in your living memory. There's just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them. But you'll have to get a genealogist to give you a slicker answer than this one.
Right, no, fair. I shall take your word for it in future. I shall start.
It doesn't really matter anyway. It doesn't matter who your father is. He might be a brutal murderer. It doesn't mean to say you're not a jolly nice chap.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's much to boast about.
Well, no, that sounds, it's quite posh is the general analysis, isn't it? But there's a lot about being a child actor. I think you get a part in the Scrooge, I think, in the Christmas Carol. And it just made me think that there's a certain species, Gary Kemp and Phil Collins or Steve Marriott and Davy Jones of the Monkees, who were child actors. Do you think that you're cut from the same kind of cloth? They were clearly people with a burning desire just to be on stage.
Well, I had a theory when I was at drama school that everybody who wants to become an actor is crippled in some way. Because I looked around at all my colleagues and everyone had something wrong with them, whether it's just a missing finger, a birthmark, a stammer, or in a threatened sexual minority. There was always something, yeah. And so a flawed person wants to go on to the stage. But I wasn't a child actor in the way that David Jones of the Monkees was. It was just like being in a school play.
Right.
So in what way, why do you think flawed people want to go on stage? What is it that they're looking for?
Well, goodness knows why. Because they're not happy with themselves, so they want to pretend to be somebody else. Now, a more absurd occupation, I cannot think. Talk about frivolous.
So you went to RADA in the end, did you?
Well, I did go there, yes. I know it's amazing. I just scraped in because what I found out when I got there is that they find it difficult to fill the places available for 14 men and 7 women. And so, yeah, although they get thousands of applicants, it's still almost impossible for them to find anybody good enough or not,
So what year did you start there, and who was there at the same time? Can you remember?
Tim Spall, he was there.
Oh, right.
Lovely Tim Spall. Anton Lesser was in my term, sort of classical actor.
Yeah.
Gary Whelan, you might not know him. Who else? Oh yes, Juliet Stevenson. And Imelda Staunton. And they were so lovely, those girls. They were always very nice to me. And, friendly.
Do you run into them? Do you ever run into them nowadays, these kind of people?
I once saw Juliet Stevenson in a backstage after a play she was in. And, she's a lovely girl and she's a jolly good actress.
Right.
You talked about the RADA, the acting tradition at the time was just changing. I thought it was really interesting. You said that your idea of acting was the kind of booming voice of Albert Finney, but they've got a whole new way of looking at things. And that I think it was kind of personal flamboyance was frowned upon. That's really interesting.
It really was. Well, it still is, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the English never like personal flamboyance, whether you're an actor or not.
Yeah.
But never, I want to say, the theatre.
Yes. Donald Wolfett.
Fun. That character seemed more fun than any of the roles ones required to play.
Right.
The character of an actor.
So did you think when you'd formed a band, I think they're called Dennis and the Lapels, whatever, did you think when punk came along, or maybe it was a band called The Visitors actually, when punk came along, did you think, this is my chance, this is my ticket to get in by getting involved on the punk bandwagon? Did you think of that as a kind of theatre in a way?
Well, I certainly saw it as my opportunity because I'd always try to write songs. And I knew I could write songs that were just as good, if not better, than the ones going on. And yes, I always was aware that a band on stage is occupying a theatrical space, and it's very important to put on a show. And all the people I've loved most have done that, like Slade, the Rolling Stones, Gary Glitter. They always put on a great show.
Yeah.
And it's important, I think. Well, I mean, it's the sort of thing I like. I mean, you get the other type of sort of shoegazing, but that's just another image. It's not mine.
Did you feel you were acting a role, though, when you were the front man of that group?
Oh, yes. That Tenpole Tudor, it is a total sort of role. Well, I was searching for a role, really. First of all, I wanted to outdo Mick Jagger and be even more energetic than him. The folly of youth. That was a mistake. Because at our first gig, after about the third song, I wanted to die because I'd given off so much energy. And then I realised you've got to be supremely fit for that job. And then, took up running and stuff. Which no one really wants to hear. They just want to hear how many drugs you've taken.
But presumably when you first went on stage with the band, you weren't playing for long. It was quite a short sets, was it?
No, you're thinking of Jimi Hendrix who only played for 20 minutes.
Well, yeah.
On the college circuit.
But even in punk, bands didn't play that long, did it?
Well, our first gig was at the Moonlight Club, and we did a 45-minute set. That was considered, less would have been too little, especially as we were headlining.
Right. As the Moonlight Club in West Hampstead, is that right?
Well done, yes, that's right.
Round the corner from Decca Recording Studios, as used to be.
Was it?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Previously known as Kluk's Cleek.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's had loads of different names over the years. Moonlight. It's called the Railway, isn't it? Something like that.
Railway Tavern, I think it is.
Something like that. Railway Tavern, yeah.
But just going back very briefly to the punk band you were in, I think it's really interesting because if you suddenly blues had happened and you looked at blues and thought, we'd like to be a blues band. It's a question of learning a certain type of music. But with punk, it's an entire package, isn't it? It's a kind of stagecraft, and it's clothes, and it's an attitude, and it's a way of singing, it's a way of songwriting, and it's the choruses, and it's the whole package. Who did you look at particularly when we first formed that punk band? Who were you observing and thinking, I'm going to appropriate a bit of that?
Well, it's funny to say that, because when the punk thing kicked off, I was still at RADA, which was all intensive. And the first time I even heard about punk was I saw a copy of the fanzine Sniffing Glue by, was it Mark Perry who started?
Yeah, Danny Baker and Mark Perry.
Danny Baker and Mark Perry. Yeah.
And it was just an old bit of paper with a but I just got it. I got punk rock immediately. I absolutely knew totally what it was, everything about it, and how it was up my street. And everyone at drama school said, "Oh, look, Ed, they're copying you," when they read about the punk rock movement. So I was that sort of character anyway, and so it was an easy fit. And very much the rebel.
What aspect
stance.
of you were they copying?
What?
What part of you were they copying, do you think?
Well, I used to do a little thing with my guitar, play the guitar at the sort of freshers' ball. Well, it wasn't really a freshers' ball at drama school, but when the new intake came, there was a bit of a party, welcome everybody. And I used to play, and I had my leather jacket on, and pretending I was Keith Richards, I suppose, which is sort of punky in a way, you know. But that's what they thought anyway.
Right.
Tenpole Tudor, it's a brilliant moment in the book where Swords of a Thousand Men come out and you go on Top of the Pops. And it's really brilliant because you think, all my life I want to be on Top of the Pops, and Top of the Pops is a huge programme and my life is going to be changed by this. And then you feel that it wasn't changed. And there's a sense of disappointment. You think the next night you're going to put on a show and there's going to be a whole lot of people at the front of the stage, but there aren't. So how did you react to that?
Well, it wasn't one of those stories like Jim Honeyman Scott of Pretenders, who said it was the most disappointing day of his life when he got to number one because he didn't feel any different and nothing changed. So immediately I was sort of excited to be on it. But it was more surprised when the next gig we did, having been on it, there was hardly anybody there. So I'm thinking, what more do I have to do to get a big crowd of people already at the front by the time we go on stage? But the answer to that is because it was every 12-year-old boy in the country, all 350,000 of them, and nobody else who bought that song and made it a smash hit. So they didn't come to the gigs because they were in bed.
Yeah. So when
I found that out years ago, I was so relieved because it explained why the hall wasn't packed after our triumphant debut on Top of the Pops.
So it was kind of, you were looked at as a kind of novelty act to some extent then.
Well, Dave Robinson wanted us to be a novelty act. Anyone who saw us live said there's nothing novelty or funny about you whatsoever. But Dave Robinson wanted to sort of de-ball us by making us just a novelty act so we wouldn't be dangerous in any way. Because he hated all that punk. He hated punk, really. The thing about punk that I liked, he didn't like. He just wanted wacky fun. He was the sort of man who'd rather make £5 today than £1,000 next month.
And I suppose it's about the same time as Madness, isn't it?
Oh, good old Madness. Yes, they were my stablemates.
Yes. So he must have, and they were doing really well, weren't they, by kind of playing up the cartoon side of their...
oh, yes, that was their whole act. I know, it was perfect for both them and for Stiff. Although, funny enough, on stage, they were kind of very ordinary.
Yeah.
So he was encouraging you to do the same then?
Well, I mean, not so much encouraged, but you could tell that's what he liked. No, it was him who suggested I wear a kilt for the Hayrick single. So he had some ideas, yeah. What's the question?
No, it was just interesting that you had just decided to go with that kind of slightly cartoonish and comedic approach. You know, the way you dressed up.
I see. Yes, well, I suppose that's sort of. Well, I had the mental age of about an 11-year-old. That's all I could sort of think of doing. I suppose just be sort of a bit crazy. I was hiding behind that sort of act, I guess. Yeah.
Did you go on any Stiff package tours?
Oh, yes.
Who were you with? Which one were you on? I'm trying to remember.
3 months. We had 3 months, every single night, all over Europe, America, and in the UK. Half-hour set each, rotating order. It was fabulous fun. On the bill also were Joe King Carrasco
and the Crowds.
Yes.
Band. They were fantastic. The Equators from Birmingham.
The Equators, of course. Reggae group, yes.
Clive, Any Trouble.
Clive Gregson. Yeah.
Clive Gregson. And Dirty Looks of New York Trio. And Tenpole Tudor.
Right. So how normally on stiff tours you travel around by some novel, either in a coach or on a train or whatever. Do you have?
We had a coach.
You as a coach, quite simple, was it?
No, it became
not
like
for 3 months, surely.
What?
You say it was a 3-month tour?
Yes.
So you were spending most of that 3 months in a coach with all these guys?
Yes, and you know how, if you get a coach journey to Leeds and it takes 8 hours, you're going to arrive really tired. Yeah. Well, we got so used to being on the coach that it wasn't remotely tiring. And so you could either sit on your own or you could have a table seat and socialise. It was really nice sort of sitting room. Most people were fairly chilled, husbanding their energy for the evening's explosion. So it was very nice.
Was it competitive? I mean, was it one of those things? Did you alternate who the headliners were every night?
Yes, it was completely fair, just democratically worked out. I worked out that 5 bands on it, the best was to be 3rd or 4th, not 5th. By the 5th band, everyone's pretty tired.
They're tired.
Yeah,
that's the
so
point.
true.
That's so true. Yes.
Yeah.
They're not ready if you're 1st. They're tired if you're 5th.
Yeah.
You want to be in the middle.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So when Tenpole Tudor, how long did that keep functioning, or does it still function?
Well, of course, all band searches are still going. So
Yes.
Tenpole Tudor carried on. Well, we had a horrific breakup, and it sort of broke my heart. And then I drifted into acting for a while, which wasn't really where I belonged or what I wanted to be doing.
Go back to the breakup, because it's really interesting, the stuff you wrote about that. And I thought, because part of the problem was that you get into the van one day and you say that you can feel that the temperature has changed. And that some of that is to do with their resentment about the songwriting royalties and that you're making more money than them. I mean, was that the case? And surely that happens in lots of bands, doesn't it?
Yes, it probably had something partly to do with that, I dare say. Although no, I got on with some of the members better than others. I didn't get on very well with the drummer. And, it's incredibly hard work. You don't get a day off. But so there was a split in the band. And some bands get around it by saying, we'll all take an equal cut of all royalties. But I'm so glad I didn't agree to that. So glad, because, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards wrote, it wasn't the whole band. I just copied them. Lennon McCartney, Tudor Pole Westwood, or whoever co-writes. But the thing is, the next song, we all co-wrote it, but that didn't become a hit.
Well, this is it. So do you still get kind of PRS royalties or whatever for Tenpole Tudor hits?
Yes. Very nice. It's amazing. It just keeps rolling in every year in, year out. Not that much, but what I don't understand is it's always roughly the same. 40 years.
Yes, it never goes up or down.
But it sometimes gets a little peak, like when Haven Holidays used Swords of 1,000 Men on their advert. It peaked then, and then Who Killed Bambi's on Netflix now in the Robert De Niro TV show called 0 Day. Robert De Niro's having a nervous breakdown, and Who Killed Bambi's obviously the soundtrack to it.
That's extraordinary.
Isn't it?
The life of these things, it just extends all the time, doesn't it? And streaming has changed this, hasn't it? Because it used to be if you were in the record catalogue, you did all right, but if you were deleted, you didn't. Whereas nowadays, things just live forever, don't they?
It's really it's great, really. I just wish Heyday was longer. Just think of how many more songs there'd be. But I've always continued to write songs, and I've got a whole nother batch ready. But, I play the songs live.
It's brilliant they're still earning. That's really encouraging.
Well, most of my money's made by live. I've been playing live for most of this century.
Yeah, you started about 15 years ago doing a solo act, didn't you?
Well, I sort of go out, I do a solo show now, and it started in 2004. I did it every weekend until the pandemic. And so there's a technique to the one-man show.
And what does that consist of?
Learn.
What does that consist of?
Well, you get them to do most of the work. For instance, And even you think, well, Swords of a Thousand Men on one guitar. Well, I mean, I have the guitar sounding really kind of bollocky as possible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like an acoustic, although it looks like one. And then when it comes to the chorus of Swords, I just move away from the microphone. So they have to sing it themselves, otherwise they ain't going to hear it.
So the secret of a one-man show is let the audience do most of the work.
Yes, and they do like a nice sing-song to make up. I mean, there's enough crash bang wallet merchants without me adding to it. So it's a slightly different angle. And then I adopt a Will Hay persona and I berate the man at the back. Oi, you in the back, behave yourself. See me afterwards. And then it becomes sort of surreal. But
Will Hay, obviously.
They all grinning away, so I can have my comedy, and they're very happy. I'm very happy, and then I meet them all afterwards, and they're friends now.
So I'm very intrigued by the idea you started off doing this at weekends. I like the idea of it being it's a weekend thing, is it?
Well, these days that's what they don't have gigs in the week now.
No,
and all the venues are closing, so the weekends are when they are. You might get a Thursday.
Who are you performing in front of? Who do you generally find yourself looking at?
Well, the Northern, Midlands, Yorkshire, North East, the West Country, South Wales and Scotland. Well, steelworkers, miners, middle class, working class 50-year-olds.
Are they? I was going to say, are they mostly the same age? They're probably all people who were 15 in 1981, 1982 or whatever. Would that be roughly true? Or do you
they're everybody who was 12 who bought Swords of a Thousand Men. They're now in their mid-50s.
As you said earlier, that's a large pool, isn't it? It's 350,000 people in your potential audience.
Well, in a way, but potentially. But I might be deluded. A literary agent said I was. She said, all these people who are in groups, they think everybody who bought their record is going to buy their book.
That's somebody trying to get your expectations down.
Yes, but lower your advance.
You see, you're now reaping the benefit of the fact that your original fans were all 12 by the fact that they're only in their 50s now.
Exactly, they're so young.
Absolutely,
That's
got
true.
years left. That they keep subsidising you. That'd be a good thing. So how do you you're one of those rare people who's worked as a musician and as an actor?
No, I don't work as an actor. I would never work as an actor. It's the worst profession in the world.
Is it?
But you did, though. You were in a...
I did. That was my, what do they call those, wilderness years. Right. It's the most awful... You haven't read my book. My chapter on acting gives you my opinion of it. It's just horrible, horrible, horrible. Most actors are awful people. Almost every musician I've met is a lovely person. They're completely different animals. I was like a cow in a field of sheep looking over the hedge at a load of cows thinking, hang on, I'm in the wrong field. and all actors ever want to do is tell you how successful they are.
But isn't that just the actors on the way up? You're very unkind about Kenneth Branagh, who goes on and on and on about how much he's done. But surely when you're in a play, I think with Rex Harrison and Edward Fox, you quite liked them. You were impressed by them, and they're so successful. They don't need to say all that.
I didn't mind a bit the actual acting work. There's only 5% of your life. It's the other 95% I didn't like. Yeah. And the impotence and the unemployment and the reactiveness. For a man like me, it's not, I'm a proactive man. It was utter hell. I was so glad to escape it. I escaped it by running away to television and presenting the Crystal Maze. They don't offer bit parts to game show hosts. And that shut them up. And that left me with no other option but to go out with my guitar.
So acting is a thing of the past now.
It's a horrible thing of the past.
But there was a stage when you were in the Sex Pistols experience, weren't you? The band, the Sex Pistols experience.
Oh, no. I've done some gigs with them.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because it made me think that Dave and I have talked about this quite a bit, that in some ways there are parallels between theatre and music, that people are now bands are going out now and playing, or bands are forming to play particular albums as if they were plays being reenacted. And
I know, that's very odd. When I was first suggested would I like to do a show with the Sex Pistols experience, I said, of course not. I mean, how awful. I mean, what could be worse than a fake Sex Pistols? But I went along to try, I'd try anything once, and they were really good. And as you say, it was like a theatrical enactment.
Yeah.
Very well done indeed. And you did the audience did experience the Sex Pistols, mainly because their frontman was particularly good and charismatic in his own right and had his own style and sort of made it his own. And it was fine for me because I did my set first. The place was packed. So I played to a packed house. And then at the end, it was Swords of a Thousand Men finale, where every stop was pulled out. And I played Swords of a Thousand Men far more times with them than with Tenpole Tudor. And that, of course, brings down the house. And so what's not to like? I go home with my wallet stuffed with banknotes, a triumphant night behind me. And I was very happy. But I must just say, man, I saw the real Sex Pistols at the Albert Hall 2 nights ago.
Yes.
Did you
How
see
was
them?
it? I saw the reviews.
How was it?
Oh, man, it was just fantastic. That Frank Carter.
This is Frank Carter playing the part of Johnny Rotten, isn't it?
Frank Carter, never mind Johnny Rotten. Frank Carter was a brilliant frontman. He whipped up the hall and he made it his own. And he was really good. And,
did you go and see them afterwards? Because you knew Steve Jones and Paul Cook pretty well, didn't you?
Listen, I love Steve Jones. And I was in the party room, but of course the band don't go to the party room. Then Mrs. Cook dragged me in to meet Steve Jones. But we sat next to each other backstage, as happy as 2 mince pies. And I just love him, man. I don't know how to explain it. And I think he loves me. So we just sat together, and it was so nice to see him. So I got a very soft spot for him because he played a seminal part in my life, and he was always very kind to me in the old days.
When did you first meet him? Can you remember first meeting him?
Well, it was probably at the audition, when we mimed the Great Rock'N'Roll Swindle song. So I shook his hand.
Tell us about that, because you applied to play the part really of Johnny Rotten, who'd left the group for the Rock and Roll Swindle. What was involved in the audition? What happened there? There was Malcolm and with the rest of the members of the band there?
Not on day one. Day one, they weeded out most people, and then they got about 4 people back for day 2 to do the filming of the song with the Sex Pistols. To put a, mime. So that's what happened on the second day. But Sid Vicious came in, obviously on drugs, with Nancy Spungen. And she was really horrid, actually. And everyone, of course, was transfixed by the presence of Sid and Nancy. And, we were all sitting in the auditorium, a lot of waiting around. And Nancy Spungen went on stage and did a mock striptease, bam, 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 and sort of took off her shirt. And she got down to her bra and pants and then said, "The rest is reserved for Siddy boy." And anyway, Sid was slumped in the stalls, and then he turned around and said, "Why don't you lot all fuck off?" And one of us said, "Oh, bollocks." And he said, "What are you saying bollocks to me?" And he clambered up and came forward to the boy and started punching him. So here's this boy being punched by his hero, trying to fend off the blows. But it's all a bit handbags at dawn, and 5 minutes later...
It's so on brand, isn't it? You'd be disappointed if Sid Vicious didn't behave like that.
Well, yeah, I think he felt the pressure to do that, poor boy. He was a most unfortunate lad with a terrible start in life.
Did you imagine that film would... what did you think its prospects were? A Sex Pistols film without Johnny in it when you got involved.
Well, I couldn't see how they could do it. It's like making a film about the Rolling Stones without Mick Jagger.
Yeah. But
Malcolm was just cobbling bits and pieces together. And it was only after he'd been ousted from any further control of the Sex Pistols that Julian Temple opportunely cobbled together all the bits of various footage and called it the Great Rock'N'Roll Swindle, directed by Julian Temple. That was his sort of way in. Very enterprising, but that's what happened.
Yeah. But so you've known Steve Jones, 50 years, I suppose, getting on?
Very long time, although we're not really in contact.
Right.
He's not a great man for modern technology. He's not a great man for old-fashioned. No, he's not very good
like yourself.
writing.
Did you feel that your backgrounds, they're very dissimilar, yours and Steve Jones? Were you conscious of that when you
this is it.
Him?
I felt so conscious that I was obviously his social inferior, and partly why I loved him, because he never held that against me.
Yeah.
He was particularly nice and came round to my squat, and we went out to an Indian restaurant and tried to get to know each other. And he was telling me all the bands he liked before punk rock. He's not a great punk rock fan, Steve Jones, to be honest.
No,
he's much more traditional. But what a guitar player he is! He even had a few rehearsals with them, and the way he played guitar was just amazing. Really unique style.
So
he was. I know. I was always a bit embarrassed about being slightly posh, and I suppose I used to moderate my accent a little. But Phil Daniels once said to me, Phil Daniels, he said to me, this is in the wilderness years when I was doing a TV show with him and Rick Mail. He says, really, old Ed, every time I meet a middle class person, they try and talk Cockney.
Yes, true.
And I said, oh, really? How very patronising of them. He says, yeah, it is a bit. So, but accents are like clothes. You put on any clothes you like, you can be anyone. I can do all the accents. So, they don't mind, though. That's it. They don't mind now, and I don't bother to pretend it's because they've seen me on telly. I can't pretend I've got a different name. Can't start talking like that now, can I? You didn't talk like that on the television.
So what's your ambition for this book? What's your hope for it?
What I want is everyone to read it, because it's a sort of redemption. I'm looking for redemption, and it explains things. It explains my behaviour.
In what way are you looking for redemption? What do you mean by that?
Because I've made some probably poor choices, and it's a way of explaining. Well, was it Socrates who said an unexamined life is not worth living? Well, it's like your submission at the pearly gates.
Yeah.
Okay, I know I messed up here and there, but this is my story, and
here's my book.
Yeah. So I gain a few points because I'll cheer you up. And then sometimes I think that my whole life has simply been 60-odd years of painstaking research for the book.
That's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And
it's a terrific book.
You've still got gigs coming up.
Oh, Lord, yes. Loads. And I've got a new show now to make life even harder. I play songs in the first half, then they have an interval, then I tell stories for the second half.
This is
this is the thing. That's
what Johnny Ron's doing this.
Exactly.
But I couldn't get anyone to publish the book. And I thought, well, these stories are too good to miss, so I'll do them in the show. But I actually suspect they prefer the stories to the songs. If they do,
I think that's the truth, because people remember the stories more. There's more information in a story, isn't there, than a song you already know. You're just hearing a retread of something you loved 50 years ago.
But you can only do the story once. And if you go back to the same town, you've got to have a whole new load of stories. But all my best stories are, I haven't got any other stories.
Well, just have to find different venues.
So now the book's out, will you be able to do the same thing, telling the stories? Because presumably a lot of those are in the book.
Well, yes, but not all of them. And it's a sort of a comedy act, really. So I tell a story, they all laugh, and I say, and that one's not even in the book. And then they all laugh again. So it becomes a running gag.
Right.
So they're not all in the book. But you're quite right. Once the book comes out, well, then I'll stop doing the story gig, I suppose.
I'm sure you won't. Well,
it's very good. It's really enjoyable and funny and very self-mocking. And
oh man, I'm so pleased.
It is. No, I learned a lot and I really enjoyed it. It's terrific.
It's called The Pen Is Mightier, Autobiography of a Punk Rocker by Edward Tudor Pole. Edward, lovely to talk to you.
Great to talk to you.
Oh, mate, it's been a real pleasure as well. Thank you very much for having me on your show.